Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Captive Audience. It's your hosts, Don Anderson and Leslie Schneider. Say good evening, Leslie.
Hello, everyone.
We're so glad you're here. Feel free to give us your chats, whether your chats be your chats. Yeah, I do the rants, you do the
Yeah.
chats.
Yeah.
So feel free to hit us at the chat line with any questions, comments, and thoughts that you have. Merry Christmas, everybody. We're not afraid and ashamed to say Merry Christmas, by the way, here. Stop that cat. And Kitty Cat's here to visit us too. So if you see whiskers in the screen every now and then, just know that she likes the rap with us here. So, all right. So I thought I'd kick this off with a little bit of news on the international front. And of course, we'll get to the local front here shortly. And on the international front, I thought one of the more interesting comments that got, or interesting things that happened, was one of our senators, Massey, introduced a bill. And I'm going to shoot that in the chat line in just a moment so you can read about it. Where, let's see, the bill introduced the concept of the United States withdrawing from NATO. And if you think about it, it absolutely makes sense given all the changes that have happened. So going back to the history of NATO, of course, NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, for anybody who's out there wondering what it stands for, was designed to be a bulwark against uh, the large and growing threat of Soviet communism that happened beginning roughly in 1946, so after World War II. And it did a great job of preventing Europe from destroying itself. Because if you recall, we'd already had a World War One, a World War II, and really before that, people forget I can't remember the war. There was a war in the 1870s that resulted in the unification of Germany. So you'd had that war. So they had been warring, well, actually been warring each other for centuries. But certainly World War One and World War Two were just we've had just about. So this was put into place to prevent that from happening. Well, the biggest reason for putting it into the place was Soviet Union. Soviet Union collapsed 30 years ago. So for the last 30 years, we've been funding this thing. And you got to ask yourself, well, why are we doing that? It's basically a Cold War relic, in the words of Senator Massey. And the way Europe is behaving lately, we have less and less in common with them. Why in the world would we be sending our boys and girls to go potentially, fight and die for a continent that won't even pay to defend itself, which is a whole nother part of the story. So I thought that was really interesting. Then you combine this with there was a U.S. strategy paper which was recently leaked that basically stated that the United States, Europe should be eliminated from the G7. So the G7 basically being those countries with populations of at least 100 million who are large economic powers. The G7 includes the United States, China, Russia, India, and Japan. So that's kind of your superpower club, and it also includes Canada and the UK. So first thing you get to scratch your head and say, what in the world is Canada doing in it? It's not even as big as California, but that's another story. And the reason for the potential elimination is Europe's economy has basically been shrinking and they don't even pay enough for their own defense. If you think about the countries that really matter, the real power is the United States, China, Russia, India, and Japan. When you talk about the combination of GDP and military might, that's what we're talking about. And Europe's real role in the world, they're still thinking that like they are the empires of the past. France, Great Britain, to a lesser extent, India, or rather, I'm sorry, Italy, and Germany, they no longer have those footprints, but they're still behaving like it's been three generations. And they're just not there anymore. And now they're really upset that an administration's finally come along and said that, what you might say, the quiet part out loud. So let me stop there and, your thoughts on all of that, Leslie.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I mean, obviously, you know, Europe has been a really crummy partner to the United States for a long time. And in a way, you can't really blame them. They are getting away with it, right? I mean, and so it's like the spoiled, child who has absentee parents that just continue to give, and then go on these, exotic vacations that are never around in order to like enforce boundaries or, um, screen time, any of that stuff. So, I mean, Europe's been asking and getting, and without any resistance. So, I think they've just lost all control. They've lost control of their identity, and And then as a result, they've lost control of their boundaries, and then it's just kind of continued to cycle. And so that makes them a crummy partner. And if they can't step up to the plate and pay for their own self-defense and actually provide their own self-defense, then what are we doing getting in the mix? I mean, we could say that about a lot of countries.
Oh yeah. But we got 3,000 miles of ocean between us and them. That's the Russia and Ukraine. That's their problem. If they're unwilling to deal with it, and in fact, they've done everything they can. Now, granted, we've had previous administrations that have helped them in this to make it worse. When you are continuing to expand NATO to the east, which you know is going to cause the Russians to be upset, and you just keep doing it. They've gone from the 12 original member states, that now includes 32 countries. And Russia's been telling you over and over again for the last 20 years, if you keep doing that, there's going to be a red line in the sand you're going to cross. And they drew that red line. They told them Ukraine's not going to be in NATO, and NATO pushed for it anyway. So there shouldn't be any surprise here that Russia's gone to war. And that's just the way it is. Their history dictates that they do that. It was Napoleon in the 19th century that invaded them, and then it was Hitler in the 20th century that invaded them. And there's a history of those kinds of invasions going back way before that. So they need buffer states, and they're not going to allow that to happen. And so they've set this problem up themselves. Then you consider the fact that Europe continues to deindustrialize. So if you think we've been bad in terms of sending our jobs to China, Europe has done that, times 10. So how can you fight a war if you don't have the material to even fight a war with? They don't have any manufacturing anymore. They have the same problems we have here, except on steroids, that their young people can't find jobs where they work with their hands, because all that's being done in China and other places. So the stupidest thing in the world that a country can do is make itself dependent on its enemies. And that's precisely what Europe has done.
Yeah.
It's absolutely stunning. Then you look at some of the other things that go along with that. You've essentially put yourself in a position where, now I listened to, it was a podcast over in Great Britain where a guy was talking about this. Why should men fight for a culture that hates men? This is what the liberal left has done. So basically, through DEI, men can't get jobs, right? Number one, they promote all the women first. Number two, you're taking away the jobs that traditionally men who don't go to college would get. This would be the industrial work with their hands kinds of jobs, so you can't get that. Number three, you've invited all these illegals into the country. So now you've depressed the wage rate to the point where there's no jobs where you can afford a home. And number four, because you've invited all these illegals in, it's pushed up the price of housing because you've created the shortage of both rental and buying. So now you can't buy. So the question so why would I go fight for a country that hates me? And somewhere else. Interesting. In Russia, you already have an example of that, because in Russia, they've got a bunch of folks who have what you might call dual citizenship. And so Russia goes to war, and they have the equivalent of they call it mobilization over there, but they have a draft for Russians or Russian citizens to go fight in the Ukraine war. And you know what happened? All those dual citizens went right back to the other side of that duality citizenship. They left, because why would you fight for something that you don't believe in?
Right.
And that's broken the social contract. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, it was just I'm my bad habit of talking over. I get an idea and I just want to jump in.
No, jump in.
I'm working on this. This is something I'm really working on. So I'm going to cork it. But that kind of goes back to, why are we allowing foreign-born people to serve as lawmakers in the United States? It just makes no sense. Or, okay, you could be born somewhere else, but you at least have to have, residency for 25, 30, whatever. You need to have had your real meaningful existence in the United States so that, there is a full absorption of our values and our work ethic and all the things that make, and our history and all the things that make us us. I think that's part of the problem with this progressive mentality that's out there, is that a lot of these people are, a lot of them are intentionally deceiving people and, painting the United States in a negative light. But a lot of the people that are going along with it just don't know. They're foreign-born, or they're young and stupid, and, they think they have a voice, and they do. So anyway.
Well, and you have to have an allegiance to some country. You can't call yourself a country and then have people who aren't citizens of any country or have dual citizenship. That can't work. It won't stay it's for the same reason. You have to have borders.
Yeah.
If you don't have borders, then you're not a country. And there's a reason for this. And this is one of those things most people, we've had it so good for so long, we take it for granted and never stop to think about it. Uh, a country is made up of people who share a common culture, really a moral code, a code that basically tells us how we're going to behave and how we're going to respond to each other. We have to have a common code. And the language is one very common indicator of that as well, because obviously we can't communicate with each other, then we can't do anything together. So to have a common culture and a common language are two things that are essential for a country to exist. And countries that don't have that just don't last. If you look at what happened after World War One, they created all these artificial countries with these artificial boundaries, and they don't work. And they've been at war ever since because they don't have a common culture, and many times not a common language either. And this is one of the things that used to frustrate me. I hear when I was longer, it was, oh, Europe was so much sophisticated than the United States was. People speak multiple languages and blah, blah, blah. And that is like, looking back on it, that is like the stupidest argument ever. One of the things that makes the United States great is we have one language. Everybody speaks it. So think about how much smoother everything is because not having to translate everything all the time. And those European countries that have done well, yeah, they might speak multiple languages, but guess what? In Great Britain, the language is English. In Spain, the language is Spanish. In France, the language is French. Now, you might learn other languages, right? But you have one language that binds your culture together. In the United States, that language is English. If you don't speak the lingua franca, then you just can't participate in it. That's the first part. And the second part is from a common culture perspective. And we've already seen what happens with a lot of these illegals that come from places where the culture is, to be blunt, not Judeo-Christian. It doesn't work because the very thing that binds us together is that common culture. Whether you're a Christian or not, you still benefit from it. You don't have to be a Christian going to church. You grow up here, you learn that because it's wired into our very fabric of what we do. And I'll just give you one example. If you're gay, we don't throw you off the building, for example, right? They do that in other cultures. If you're a woman, they wear a bag on your head. Well, they do that in other cultures, right? That's the culture. That can't work here. It's not rocket science, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've got nothing I have no retorts. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And as a woman who, yeah, I mean, I'm so tired of sort of the Chicken Little, everyone's a victim mentality that there's, some of these folks and then you stop paying attention to the real victims, the people that are being thrown off of buildings, the people who are forced to wear, a burqa, the people who, are truly, their houses are burned down because they're Christians, and they're fleeing for their lives, and it's just, I don't know. It just, you're right. I mean, our forefathers fought and died, as did other countries' forefathers fought and died for their national identity. And it's just lunacy to me that we have so many people going along with the degradation of that.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things have happened over the past 50 years. It's probably been going on longer than that for certain over the last 50 years. And one of them is we have allowed the worst among us. We've allowed the leftists, those who don't agree with the founding principles of the country, to rise to positions of power and then to leverage that against the rest of us. That's the one thing. And the second, and not a small thing, we've turned our youth over to the establishments they run to literally raise them. So the public school system used to be a place when we were kids that you could go and you pretty much were passed on the traditions of the country. They weren't trying to destroy the country in the classroom. Now, they're not only trying to destroy the country, they're trying to destroy the culture, which that's just another way of saying Judeo-Christianity. So by the time that kid has spent, 18 years of their life in the public school system, and if you're unfortunate enough, then goes on to the university system where they get more indoctrination, wasn't any surprise that 30 or 40 of them think communism's fine. They know nothing about the history of it. They know nothing about how economics works. They know nothing of morality, and are led to believe that we can create heaven here on earth, which anybody with any foundational principle understanding of history knows that every time that's tried, disaster ensues.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and you can only really believe that if you are, um, if you've veered away from um, Judeo-Christian values, and the first one is, I am a flawed and evil-ridden human, and I will spend my life trying to get closer to God and closer to righteousness, and but I'm going to mess up every single day, multiple times a day. If you don't recognize that, if you don't recognize that there's a God and that we are a created being by God, then you really think that you could do absolutely anything. So these um, altruistic, ideas of communism, socialism, all that, they sound like, well, absolutely, we could enact that.
Mhm.
Like, that's not a workable business plan. You it, it's not a machine manual. You have
Mhm.
humans involved, and we're gonna mess it up. So, again, if you don't recognize that that is truth, that we are flawed, and then you're not going to understand why these policies and these mindsets don't work.
Yeah. And that at its basis is why I think it was John Adams said roughly that a constitutional republic can only work for a religious people, because you have to be humble enough to recognize that you yourself are not perfect and not perfectible. One of the basic foundations of communism is they think they can create heaven here on earth. At least that's what the founder said. Now, those who try to implement know full well that that's impossible.
Yeah.
But the only way to put such a system in place is you basically have to kill everybody who disagrees with you. And that's precisely what's happened. And I think one of the more interesting things that happens in every regime like this is you wind up killing what I call the minions, right? So these are the people who are out there, the little people, if you will, who are so empowered with trying to make this thing come to fruition. So think about in our culture, the your crazy Aunt Betty on a quarter screaming and carrying around a banner, and and basically saying all the platitudes that the radical left wants you to say, no kings, and all this other stuff for the
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter, that crowd. Well, the thing is, something's internally wrong with those people, and they think that by getting their administration with their values in place, that thing that's wrong inside of them will be fixed. Well, what happens in every one of these regimes once they take power, guess what? Their lives don't change. Their internal problems aren't fixed. So they once again become, because they're dissatisfied and it hasn't worked, they're not going to look in the mirror and blame themselves because they're not humble, which is a very Christian concept, right? Because we're the opposite of humble is pride. So they're not going to look into themselves as being the problem. They'll look at the problem being somebody else's fault, in this case, the government. So they become counter terrorists, if you will, to the last regime. And this is why one of the first things that happens once the Lenins, the Stalins, the Chairman Mao's, the Pol Pots, the Fidel Castros, they go and kill off the minions because they know right off the bat their biggest problem is going to be these guys, and it happens every time.
Hmm.
It's pretty fascinating
Hmm.
when you
Yeah.
get into what happens, and it's very predictable. But to see the history play out, um, so it's theoretical they'll do it, and it's historical when you see it play out, right? And it's played out over and over again.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And you can only go along with it if you are deceiving yourself or deceiving others. You're either um, you're either part of the plan, or you're just so naive and uninformed that you're just going to go along with it. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that need to be right, that you see in these people, the inability to be introspective, and the narcissism. Like you look at the Palestinian movement, the PLO movement is another one of these things. You see leftists get up and they're supporting an outfit that if they were in those countries, they'd be the first ones killed. So you see gays, for example, in support of that. Well, you'd be the first one thrown off a building. followed by the liberal woman who would be the first one with a bag on her head before she was thrown off the building.
Right, right, right.
Why are they supporting? And the reason is because they cannot admit that they're wrong. So when I think it was October 7th, that was the day a couple of years ago when when they did that massive terrorist attack on Israel,
Israel.
and the results of that were absolutely horrific. I mean, I guess you could go someplace and look at some of the video of this. I could never look at something like that. But there are people who are insiders, of course, who got to see what they actually did to women, children, babies, old people, like the whole 9 yards. We don't have to go into the details here. You can only imagine. We're talking third century kinds of barbaric stuff. And these people heard about that. And for a few days, they were relatively quiet. And then they came out bashing Israel again. How could you do that? So you heard the facts and you just ignored them and just went on with Israel as a cause of this. So you have to ask yourself, for people who are capable of that, so why would that be? It's not rational. And the reason is because these people are unwilling to look in the mirror or look at themselves and say, hey, I could have been wrong, or I might have been mistaken. That capability is just not there for them.
Well, there's animals everywhere. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not. I mean, honestly, we yeah, I don't know. It's to me, it's very complicated. But I don't think true. I mean, if the Muslim faith is while they have, they will tell you over and over again that they're a peaceful religion. I mean, they have some commandments in there that are pretty specifically targeted at violence against infidels, and but there's also plenty of us in Christian society that aren't practicing Christians, and we do horrific things too. So
And I think the way you have to look at this is this: you're looking at this from a philosophical perspective. So very few people practice their religion to its end. Do they follow it do they do exactly what it says to its end? So anybody can call themselves a Muslim, a Christian, a Buddhist, a whatever, right? Big C Christian, little c Christian, right? So the best way to evaluate these things, I think, from a secular perspective, is look at, okay, what did the founder of that religion do? What
Right.
was their life like? How did they behave?
Yeah.
And if you look at that, then that will tell you what the people who follow it to it. Because you only need a small percentage of people to completely destroy or completely make your society either great or evil. So there are lots of people who halfway practice their faith, and those aren't the people we're talking about. We're talking to people at the extremes. So if I was an extreme, let's say Catholic, what would I do? Well, I'd probably be in a monastery or a monk. I mean, that's what or a Mother Teresa type of scenario, right? Because that's the principles would dictate that those are the kinds of things if you were a Buddhist, then what would that look like? What would Shinto look like, right? What would those look like? If you followed Islam to it and you did exactly what it said, then what you would have is what you see.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a ton of them.
That's right.
It's one of the extreme ones to do that. If only 1% of them are doing that, let's say you allow, let's say 100,000 people in your country, and 1% of them are doing that, 10%. So that means 1,000 people will be doing that. 1,000 people is a lot of murdering and killing. And this is why allowing people from cultures that don't fit here will not work. You take a classic example, Somalia, Haiti, places like that. They come into a community and the civilizational background doesn't fit. And that's not people say, oh, Don, you're racist, Don, you're this and that. I'm just looking at objective reality. If you go to those countries, what do you see? You see garbage everywhere. You see trash everywhere. There's countries where if you had to go to the bathroom, you stop and you go to the bathroom right there. This is normal. That's just normal. If your wife doesn't do something you like, then you set her on fire, right? These things happen, and that's the norm in those places. That's not going to easily assimilate here.
Right.
Or you only hire people from your clan to go to another level, right? You only hire people who look like you, or literally in your family, or literally in your clan. One of the biggest reasons why India, you would think to yourself, countries filled with uber smart people, then why is it that the country is so unsuccessful? One of the biggest reasons is they have this clan behavior.
Mhm.
If you have that, you're not going to hire and promote the best. You're going to hire and promote the relative, and that's one of the things that holds it back. And that's one of the things that makes the United States unique, because in this country, generally speaking, that doesn't happen. And
Right.
if you do that, you wind up going out of business because your competitor is going to figure out that's not going to fly.
Yeah.
So there's reasons why countries are the way they are. In polite company, we're not allowed to talk about these things. But I think we all kind of suspect it deep inside our brains. You look around the world and you see countries that are like, look, the West is where people immigrate to,
Hmm.
and the non-West is where they flee.
Yeah.
Well, the West is different from the Middle East and the rest of the world. Why is that? The principal difference is Judeo-Christianity, and Judeo-Christianity is a lot more successful way to behave. There, I said it. I said the quiet part out loud, and I hadn't even talked about. I'm not a theologian. I'm not talking about going to heaven or any of that stuff. It just turns out that if I hold the door open for the older lady, if I care about my fellow man who's poor, and I create something like a Salvation Army or St. Vincent de Paul, it turns out that if I hire people based on their performance rather than what they look like, if I'm willing to hire people who don't belong to my same clan, if I'm willing to do those things, if I'm willing to follow rule of law, if I'm willing to respect, women as equal, if I'm willing to do those things, my society just winds up better. Who knew? It just produces a better outcome.
Yeah. That's
You know,
right.
and it's Christianity, by the way. You think about these other things. Where do hospitals come from? Who invented hospitals? Well, Christianity invented hospitals. The story of the Good Samaritan, you go back to that. That was you didn't help people on the side of the road. That's why that was such a unique story at the time that it was written. You look at the names of the hospitals in the community, and what do you see?
Right.
Obviously biblical names. Good Samaritan this, St. Jude that, right? And there's all kinds of, Christian faiths that have these hospitals. I mean, they're everywhere. They litter the country. And why is St. Ignatius this, right? Why? Because other countries, other cultures don't have that tradition. Things like I just mentioned, St. Vincent de Paul's and what's the other one? The Salvation Armies, right? Those come from Christian faith people who went and wanted to help others, and they did that. That's highly unusual. I don't know that it happens anywhere else in the world. Maybe Great Britain, which is the mother country, which is also Judeo-Christianity. What culture basically ended slavery? Well, it was Judeo-Christianity. It was Great Britain sending her ship to the high seas to stop the slave ships. It was this country basically fighting a civil war to end it. That didn't happen anywhere else in the world. So there's a reason why it's different, and it's the culture that makes it different. And that culture we call Judeo-Christianity.
It's funny how many people won't admit that, though. I mean, I can remember when Trump was first elected, and there was a conversation. I was having a conversation. Well, the whole idea that our country is was founded on Judeo-Christian, foundations and principles. And I had a Jewish friend at the time who was like, "We're not a Christian nation," and I was like, "Yeah, we are. Like, we're not a Jewish nation. I mean, we're not a Muslim nation. Like, look at our founders. Look at the way that the Constitution is aimed. It's all based on Christian values."
Well, we've allowed leftists to shout us down and make us feel like we're silly boobs if we say that. Oh, you're primitive, oh, you're like Archie Bunker, and this is and so you're kind of shamed into this. And I don't remember any specific conversation around that. That was just in the air. I remember in college, like, kind of this feeling like you weren't supposed to say you were Christian. And I wasn't like going to church Sunday every day. Don't get me wrong, I grew up like that, but as soon as I hit college, like most young people, I wasn't going. It wasn't that I was against Christianity. I just wasn't doing it, not overtly practicing it. So you were supposed to. You've been taught over the last 30 or 40 years to kind of hide it. right?
Mhm.
And so we've allowed them to do that. When we got to come back, I call it muscular Christianity, if you will. We got to come back and start being loud about it, like our forefathers did. No, if you're going to say those kinds of things, I'm coming right back at you from now on.
Yeah.
If I'm
Yeah.
sitting down at the restaurant to have dinner, guess what? I'm praying. If you don't like it, sit somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I'm praying out loud too.
And people are doing that. I mean, people who have platforms are becoming more brave. I mean, you had Russell Brand, you have Joe Rogan teasing it, of course, Tucker
Mhm.
Carlson. Tucker was interviewing George Santos, who was a New
Mhm.
York congressperson, and um,
Mhm.
he's talking about it. And who was he interviewing? Milo Yiannopoulos,
Mhm. Yeah.
who came out hard, on the right. He's revisited, rediscovered his Catholic roots. I mean, people with platforms are speaking up, and
Yeah.
Candace Owen, they're all just saying like enough, like this is what it's all about.
Yeah. Oh, and it's great. I know a couple of people that I read in that podcast have talked about this concept of permission structures. Are you familiar with that?
Maybe
Permission
I don't
structures.
know.
Well, here's in sociological or psychological circles, they talk about this. So I'm gonna paraphrase, so I won't butcher this too badly. So essentially, what permission structures are is what society says is okay for you to talk about. Like remember I
Oh,
was talking about the quiet part out loud. So there were certain things that you used to not be able to say. Like some cultures are better at civilizational accomplishment than others. Well, you couldn't say that out loud without getting eviscerated 5 or 6 years ago, or vaccines may not work. Well, you couldn't have said that out loud 5 or 6 years ago,
right.
even 2 or 3 years ago, right? Or vaccines could potentially cause autism. Oh no! Let me grab my pearls. If I had some, I'd clutch them. You couldn't. These are things you couldn't say. Well, now you can say them, and the reason is because it took a while. Initially, you had a handful of people say these things, and they were basically eviscerated to the hit early on. But
Right.
they were able to say out loud. They were brave enough. They had the courage to say out loud what a lot of people were just thinking, or already were thinking it, but didn't have the courage to say it. So it
Mhm.
takes a while for there to be a groundswell of that, where you get enough people who then begin to say it, and recognizing it is step one, saying it out loud is step two, and then saying it out loud results in thinking. Thinking results in action, which every communist hates. They don't want to keep it from getting to that point. That's one of the reasons why they're so big on controlling the information flow. The biggest reason why the Soviet Union collapsed was because of Glasnost. Well, it had a nudge from Reagan and Thatcher, of course, and Pope John Paul II. But the reason it collapsed was Glasnost, and they started opening up themselves to information. And once people inside the Soviet Union started recognizing, why do they have cars that work over there and ours don't? Why do they go to the store and they got stuff and our stores are empty? Why are we living like hell? And why is East Germany suck and West Germany sensational? And then that will cause it to change, which is precisely what happened with Romania. People started getting information. They had enough. And that's why China is shutting it down the way it is. And that's why the left tried their best to shut down the information flow in
Yeah.
this country.
Yeah. And they got away with it.
They did. They really, and they're still trying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know if I told you this story, but my father-in-law did a lot of international business
Mhm.
in the Middle East, and also in Europe and East Germany. Actually, he has
Mhm.
clients in East Germany. He's from Switzerland, and he was able to, after the wall came down, he hosted one of his clients and his wife in Zurich, where he
Mhm.
lives, and they he took them to the grocery store.
Mhm.
And I mean, Switzerland doesn't exactly have a Costco, right? They've
Yeah.
got little markets, but it's fresh and it's high
Mhm.
quality, and
Yeah.
there's enough there's variety, right?
Mhm.
And he said that he took his client and his wife into the grocery store, and they stood there and cried.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, the food and the freshness They hadn't seen it. They
Yeah.
didn't know it existed. Like
Uh,
you said, they had no idea there was another life experience than
yeah.
what they had been living in.
Hmm.
Probably, well, my father-in-law was born in probably 1937,
Hmm.
1938. So these people had grown up, in a completely different world.
Yeah, and you hear stories like that all the time. There was a story about, I think it was a MiG fighter in the late '60s, who he what do you call it when you leave the country? So he decided he was going to escape from the Soviet Union. So he flew to Japan and landed the plane. And of course, immediately the Russians wanted the Japanese to turn the plane over. We basically conspired with the Japanese. We'll get the plane back to you, but we got to make sure everything is safe and sound first. Of course, we took the thing completely apart to see what was in it, put it back together, and they wanted the pilot back. Of course, the pilot wanted to stay here, and so eventually, I forget what they call that, but he basically came in our country and he asked for asylum and was granted citizenship in the United States. And so he wrote a little book when he got back about his experiences becoming an American. And after his interrogation with the CIA and all that, they sent him to the house, got him a job. And then he remember said, I just wanted to get in the car and drive around by myself because he was sure that it was all staged. He
Yeah,
thought they had set up a store for him so they would fake him out and what it was like. So he drove all up and down the eastern seaboard and he couldn't believe it. He was going to stores because he couldn't believe it. He thought it was a fake. He couldn't believe the abundance. And there's these sorts of stories that we don't tell our own kids growing up. You have no idea how good you have it. Like Zippo idea.
yeah.
The rest of the world is not like that. Um, I had a sales rep that I used to work with, and she was Russian. Her grandmother's Russian. So she went back over there. This was right after the wall had fallen. And she talked to me about when she got back, what her experiences were like. So we're talking now, this is like the mid 90s, so after the wall fell. And she said they asked her to bring over Levi's and
Hmm.
it was something else. Yeah, it was jeans was huge because you couldn't buy it. And toilet paper, that was the other thing. You couldn't, of all things, toilet paper and jeans, outrageously expensive, couldn't find them. Right. There were other things too, but you just couldn't.
Yeah.
Yep, we just take it completely for granted.
My sister-in-law married a Cuban,
Hmm.
and again, she's Swiss, and so you can go to Switzerland if you're Cuban.
Hmm.
So she married this guy, and had kids, the whole thing, and they went back to Cuba once,
Hmm.
and they held their passports. They had to bring toilet paper. They had to bring soap. They had to bring just things that you wouldn't think, you know, basic medicine,
Yeah.
band-aids, just
Hmm.
again, things that they don't have available over there. And they're not wealthy people. I mean, there certainly are very wealthy people who live in Switzerland, but it's a very high
Hmm.
tax country, and you're
Hmm.
just kind of getting through. But they got there, and she was astounded at the poverty. She Everywhere they went, they were expected to pay for everything because they just assumed that everyone else has lots and lots of money.
Yeah.
And it was just they never went back, and they've been married for 30 years. She was afraid for her safety. She thought, "Oh, we'll never
Mhm.
get out of this country,"
Yeah.
to go.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, me and my in-laws went to the Soviet Union, I guess about 10 years ago. And they were in an adjacent Western European country, and I can't remember which one it was. And they wanted to visit like a one-day thing. You can go into the Soviet Union. Without going through all the details, they had this one day there. They said they couldn't believe it. It was the most stressful, high tense experience ever. I mean, the negative energy that everybody gave towards you, it was attitudinal because you live in a country where the whole society is based on how do I get over on my fellow human being. That's everybody's a mark, right? And
Yeah.
I got to steal from you. That's how those societies work. Um, which goes back to the basic foundational Judeo-Christian principles that we have here. Yes, evil exists where people don't adhere to those principles, but by and large, for the most part, in probably 95% of the neighborhoods in this country, you could walk around in broad daylight, middle of the night, not worried about getting knocked over the head. I
Yeah.
mean, that we take that. So my wife can go to the mailbox right now. It's dark outside, and I can sit there and not worry about it. That is a miracle.
Right.
We never stop and think about it. But there's countries in the world, I'll just name South Africa, for example, where they literally have safe houses in your house. I mean, you
Safe
have,
houses in your house,
yeah, so you have a inside your house,
like a lockup room,
a
like
lot, yeah, but yeah, safe room, I guess they call it,
yeah,
right?
safe. Okay.
Yeah, so you can lock
Wow.
yourself in to keep if the robbers break in your house, it happens often enough that it's like expected you will have this, a place where you can get away and keep these people from killing you, right? Can you imagine living like that? I just can't.
No, but I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, everybody's walking around with PTSD. I can only imagine. I mean, you
Yeah.
just, well, and I guess that also speaks to, how that wires your brain,
Hmm.
when, in formative years, and then what that does to your society. And then kind of goes back to your argument of, and do we really want these people, some of them, they're kind of always painted as, oh, these poor people, they're just trying to seek asylum. They really have this terrible place where they're coming from. And that is true. But that doesn't mean that they're going to be good for us. You
Yeah,
know,
no, yeah. And that's the first, here's a couple of principles. If you break it down to like your house, right? If you in your home, you can't help other people if your own home is a disaster, right?
yeah,
So that's the first thing. So you have to take care of your house. So the first argument is Americans have to take care of Americans first.
yeah,
Once we get them squared away, then we can think about helping other people. But I would say as a next step, help other people where they are. So help their own countries be better so they don't have to come here. So if
yeah,
you want to help them make their country better. Like in the case of Mexico, by allowing tons of Mexicans to come here illegally, what we're doing is, let's face it, we get the focus right now is on all the illegals and the bad people we get, but we also wind up getting their best and brightest because only the best and brightest are going to leave the place where they grew up, um, and take all the risk, leave their family, leave everything to go to a place where they can better their lives. And historically, we have benefited from that. Now, with this, but we've been able to, when we did that, we did it through legal immigration. So you're able to vet that. So you weren't getting the other extreme. So what Trump's argument is, and he's 100% right, is they've dumped their worst too. So mixed in with their best, we've also got their worst, and that's got to stop.
yeah,
Um, but go back to my other argument, though, we don't help those countries make their own countries better by getting their best to come here. If their best stayed there, they would fix their own country. And right now, all we're allowing them to do is come here, and then they have the audacity to tax them for the money that they send back. So they're subsidizing a government that's run so badly that they had to leave in the first place. That's not a long term solution.
yeah.
Where we need to get back to is helping them help their countries be countries that they don't have to flee in the first place.
Do we, or do we need to just get out of other people's business and take care of our own?
Oh, that's the first step. Yeah, like I said before, the first step is fix our own country, get our own problems squared away,
Yeah,
and then we can think about, and you're right to the how can I say this? Going back to my example of our own house. If I want to help, let's say I have a crazy relative. I shouldn't say crazy. A relative who's just like just not doing well. You first want to help them not in your house. Help them to say, let's say they lose their job and they can't afford their rent. Well, before you move them into your house, you want to help them find a job so they can stay in their own house, right? Because the habits that generally put them in that place are the same habits they're going to bring inside your house. And you don't want that. So you want to help them stay over there, right?
right.
And that same thing. So you want to help them stay over there. So that doesn't affect or impact your house. So let's say you have a kid. Let's say you have 5 or 6 kids, and one of them is a ne'er do well, right? He just goes off the rails, and he goes out and lives and does all kinds of crazy stuff, and he wants to move back in. You say, well, and he's grown. Well, I'm going to help you get a job and help you pay rent, and help you get these habits over there, so you
Mhm.
don't impact the other 4 kids here.
Right.
And that's the philosophy, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. We've spent so much time meddling in other people's business, trying to, and and it's, frankly, it's, I mean, it requires a lot of hubris for us to do that, um, and a lot of money, and a lot of our people,
Well,
all the
the,
sacrifices that we've made by, people dying and being injured, getting involved in other people's businesses.
the lesson should have been learned by now that you cannot nation build because you can't build a culture.
Yeah,
I mean, it's too hard to do.
yeah,
So the only time we should be engaged in any foreign stuff is when it's in our best interest to do so. And there are times when it does, but you got to be very careful about that, especially when it comes to putting boots on the ground.
yeah. How, I mean, I have a son that's draft age, and I can remember when we first started our response to, I guess it was the attack on Israel, and
Mhm,
I just thought, I mean, I think we've done a good job at not putting our boys there,
mhm,
and not in Ukraine,
mhm,
officially, although
mhm.
of course we have been there. But it infuriates me when I think of how we're expected, to take care of somebody else's business. It's
Oh,
like, absolutely not.
particularly when they won't take care of it themselves.
Right.
Like, my grandchildren just showed up, so all hell's going to break loose in a minute. So I thought I'd just close the door. It's Christmas tree night, so
Oh, Grandpa Don.
yeah, exactly. So you know where I'm going to be in about 15 minutes. but it's but yeah, and that I thought was a classic best use of how we should use our military. I mean, we had a country, it was Iraq or Iran, I always mix the two up, where they were developing nuclear weapons, right? Eventually, we're going to have to deal with that. And if you can deal with it without our boots having to be on the ground, that's how you want to deal with it. And it got done. And Israel is the next door neighbor. And Israel, unlike Europe, they do spend money on defense. They're very good at it. And they took care of it to the degree that they could. But they didn't have bunker busters. And so we had to go do that. And
Israel
that,
doesn't have
because
any.
if Hezbollah, pardon?
Sorry, Israel doesn't spend
Oh, I'm
their
sorry,
own
what's that?
defense. They spend our money.
Oh yeah, but if we allow Hezbollah to get nuclear weapons, who do you think is going to get impacted by that eventually?
Oh, for
They'll be
sure.
lobbing those things over here. So so that is a great use of resources, if you will. Now there are other things where obviously we've stupidly blown it, but I don't know, that wasn't one of them. I mean, we're going to have to deal with that, or our children or grandchildren are going to be dealing with uh, bombs landing in LA, Portland, Denver, whatever, right?
Yeah, I think we just have so much to untangle. We've just become so meddlesome, and we need to take care of our own, and yeah, I would be, you kind of started this conversation of um, disentangling ourselves. Massey is, I think Massey is a patriot, and he walks the talk, and I have a lot of respect for him. He's a non-interventionist, but not like to an extreme sense, but I think he's very common sense.
Oh
I
yeah,
do need to disentangle ourselves from a lot of these efforts and these organizations that are not serving our interests anymore.
yeah. And truthfully, I don't think we're gonna. I don't think he's. I don't think we expect to pull out of NATO anytime soon. But by firing that shot across the bow, we're basically saying, if you all don't pay your fair share and start remilitarizing yourself. I mean, I saw some numbers the other day, and they're like stunning. I think Canada, and again, this is not exact. Canada has something like 100,000, like 100,000 troops. You got more than that probably in the California National Guard,
Hmm.
right? So we're literally covering the defense of Canada.
Hmm.
They don't pay squat. I think what 3 or 4% is the target. They're like down there at 2% or something. Spain's at like 1%. They're not paying anything for their own defense. They've deindustrialized to the point that they can't even make their own weapons. And their what do you call it? And their replacement rate in terms of having children is like at 1.2, 1.3. You don't even have enough men to fight anyway. as it's going, and then you made it so your men won't want to fight for you because you hate men, especially white men. So why would I fight for a country that hates me? I can't find a job, I can't buy a house, and you hate me on top of that. I'm not fighting. And you see that. I think Britain, for example, was floating this idea of mobilizing or having a call up to deal with Ukraine. And they surveyed these young men like, I'm not going. And their dad's like, not sending my son. Why would I send my son? You got like right down the street, you got 5,000 like Somalis living for free. I'm paying their taxes, and my son's supposed to go fight for that? As we say at home, homie, don't think so.
Oh, we don't play.
Homie, don't play that. So Libby's just don't seem to get that. The young white kid in Appalachia ain't gonna go fight for that. Now, fortunately, and you saw this with the enlistment numbers. When Biden was in office, they couldn't get anybody to sign up for the military. They were way behind in the recruiting, and I knew that. You see an admiral running around, a male admiral with a dress on. You ain't gonna go sign up and like serve under that. I remember when I was in the military, I was thinking to myself, there is no way I would like sign up. I know a lot of guys that I know who were in the military said, my son ain't going into that. And let's face it, if we're in a war, 80 to 90% of the people that are going to be in infantry units are going to be men. They're not going to be women. So you can't have infantry units, soldiers, without men. And as soon as Trump won, boom, an explosion in recruiting. And that's why.
Yeah. 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 I work with a lot of veterans, and many of them have said, I got out because I saw what was going on, and I couldn't stomach it anymore.
Oh, I can't imagine. I never dealt with any of that when I was in, and I could not imagine. I just can't imagine. I think they had started the Don't Ask, Don't Tell when I was in, and that was as far as it went. And I don't think that was a good idea, but that was a whole lot better than, because that was like the crack in the door, right? And obviously they wedged that over into a giant. It was no longer a crack in the door. They blew it wide open, which was the intent from the beginning.
Sure.
It was strategic.
Sure. Sure. They won.
Yeah, they did win, and they almost destroyed the military.
Yeah. 30 years later, we're finally putting that back together. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously we need to have, just let a man be a man, let a woman be a woman.
Right. Yeah. There you go with that Christianity talk again. Next thing you know, you're going to say something like God made man and woman. You can't have that. But here again, we're comfortable saying the obvious again, and that's really important. And that's part of freedom of speech. There's many ways to suppress freedom of speech. You can suppress it with laws and all those other kind of things like they tried before, but you can also suppress it through what we talked about earlier, through these permission structures. You basically create an environment where you're not comfortable saying the obvious. Remember that children's story, The King's Got No Clothes?
Yeah, Emperor's No Clothes, yeah.
The Emperor's Got No Clothes. King walking around naked. Everybody's like, yeah, you look great.
Yeah.
Well, we just did that.
Yeah.
For the last 5 or 6 years. It's cool. The president is like the sanest guy in the world. Guys walking around looking like he literally gone to the bathroom on himself, right? And we're all pretending like he's engaged and he's there. Hadn't had a press conference in months. And we're all supposed to, and all the press pretends like it's copacetic and it's cool. And there's maybe 20% of the population screaming at the top of our lungs. That guy's like naked. and nobody's listening until it became so obvious. When they had that debate, that was the emperor has no clothes. When it finally hit them between the eyes, he can't complete a sentence. I've never seen anything like it in my life. I mean, everybody said Trump won it. Trump didn't win the debate. He just showed up.
Yeah.
Let this guy talk.
Yeah.
Trump didn't win. Biden lost. He didn't have to say anything.
Yeah.
There was that one moment in the debate where Biden said something, and Trump said, I don't even know what he said.
Yeah.
That was the best comeback I've ever seen in the debate. It wasn't anything intelligent, witty, nothing about policy, strategy, nothing like Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Yeah.
None of that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, right? None of the lofty statements in the past that you heard from presidents. I'm just trying to think. What was it, John Kennedy? Ask not what this country shall do for you, what you shall do for your country.
Yeah.
7 years ago.
Yeah.
None of that. I don't even know what he said. They should write that on like a stone mountain or something. I don't even know what he said.
Yeah. So are you tracking this this effort that is to invalidate all of the executive orders that were signed by the AutoPen?
Yes.
And they're going to
Yeah.
go back. So it's not just the ones that were right at the tail end.
I think that is, in fact, since you brought that up, right here, I was just going to read this off because this is so classic. The pardon rate of these presidents. I mean, get this.
Yeah.
So Bush had 200 pardons, right? Nixon, who you think would have had a zillion pardons given the things that were going in that administration, 926 pardons. Ford, 409 pardons. Carter, 566. Reagan, 406. You see these guys around the 400, 500, 300, 400, 500 level. Then we go to even Clinton, as appalling as that administration was from a moral perspective, at least, 459 pardons. Then you go to Obama. This is the one that just jumps, it just grabs your eye. Almost 2,000 pardons. And then you go to Biden, 8,000 pardons. And remember, these other guys I'm talking about, most of those guys had 2 terms. So they had 8 years, with the exception of Carter, Ford, let's see. With the exception of Carter and Ford, you're talking about, and Nixon had a term and a half. You're talking about 2-term guys. Biden had 8,000 in 4 years. Now, I don't even want to calculate the math on what percentage that is.
Well, he was pardoning huge groups of people, in one, executive, order, whatever. I mean, it was just like all of these people, all the way back to, back to like 2010 or something.
It had to be an AutoPen because 2 things. Number one, your hand couldn't sign that many pages that fast, number one. And number 2, you had to be awake more than 4 hours a day. And he wasn't.
So we'll see where this goes, right? I mean, I love it because now they're also talking about some of these other things. I mean, I guess he used the AutoPen in order to sign the Supreme Court appointments, and so then it's like, well, was it Kendaji Jackson,
Brown, whatever? Yeah.
So I mean, if AutoPen is,
well, it's all got to come under scrutiny.
Like us, what do you mean AutoPen? What is it? I mean, it just sounds absurd, not knowing that that's actually a thing. And then you start to dig into it, and you realize, well, of course it's absurd, and this is what happens.
Well, you did say those 2 words, not knowing. You have to be sentient to know. And the guys walking around, and anybody who's been around people who start to have senility, you could just see it. I remember when he ran, I saw it 4 years. My wife and I were sitting there talking, like, I think he's going senile, And there's a way they move, the way they walk, the way they turn their head, the way they you can tell when people are beginning to lose, become senile. And he was senile at the beginning of his term.
Yeah.
And we all know by the middle of it, he wasn't even there.
Yeah. Well, I think Obama even complained that he wasn't there. I mean, as a senator, he was never known for being an intellect. I mean, he was always wacky and offensive and a liar, and people just recognized that.
Yeah, but he I think became clinically senile by the time he was president. And I mean the beginning of the term, not even the end. By the end, you can look at the guys going to the bathroom on himself. I mean, what can you say? Anyway, and on that note, it's 7. We gotta say some great stuff though. The country is in such a better place than it was a year ago. It's hard to believe it's been a year. The election was like, we're 12, 13 months into this. He formally hasn't been president. The administration started January 25th. So it really hasn't even been a year.
Yeah.
And you look at the progress, it's just been amazing. We have been so blessed. We have so many things to be thankful for. to be born in the country where we can be Christians, where we can say it out loud, where we have the rights and freedoms that we still have, recognize that we have to fight for them to keep them, but to be fortunate enough to be in a place where that's the case is an awesome thing. And thank goodness that we have the opportunity to celebrate yet another Christmas. Leslie, your
Absolutely.
thoughts?
Absolutely. No, I was just talking to a friend last night or 2 nights ago, a Jewish friend, and she was kind of asking questions about like, well, what's more important, Jesus's birth or Jesus's resurrection? And it was like,
That's a
yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter what the answer is, but the point
yeah.
is, we have absolutely have the freedom to celebrate both of those things as loudly as we want to in this country. And at the same time, you have people who, yeah, who are being persecuted for much less. And I'm so grateful. I mean, just yesterday, I was able to pray, with a coworker, in his office. I mean, it's just such a blessing to know that I have a creator and that he wants me to speak to him and that he surrounds us all with people who are his, messengers and are vehicles for us to connect deeper to him, because they give us that opportunity. They bring us problems and then we can pray, or they bring us moments of celebration and then we can, thank God for that. It's just, yeah, it's been hard to live in that, doom and gloom that we've been in for the last several years, and kind of this upside down, Alice in Wonderland world that we've been living in. But I feel like a weight has been lifted, and that, I hate to say I can take my eye off the ball, but I actually trust. I trust that when something good looks like it's going to happen, it probably will.
Yeah.
It probably will.
And
Right?
the beauty of this is human nature. We don't appreciate things until we either lose them or we're threatened with losing them. And I know this whole episode of the last 5 to 10 years has taught me to appreciate what I have a lot more than I ever have before. And that's a good thing, right?
It is. Well, we should
Absolutely.
probably tell everybody that we're not going to go live next week.
Thanks. Like, yes. So you all have a Merry Christmas. We're going to take that week Christmas Eve. So we're going to be with our respective families, having a great time, probably having one hot toddy too many, but it is what it is. Merry Christmas, everybody. Leslie, great to see you, and I'll catch you the week after next.
That's right. All righty.
Good
Bye-bye.
night, everybody. Bye-bye.